Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of History Now, the Future, where we talk to interesting people about the most pressing issues of today, using history as our guide and the future as our destination. My name is Corey Bradford. You may know me as This Is Corey from social media. And today, my guest is also extremely popular on social media, and he's really been bridging the gap between stand up comedy and comedy on social media for years now. I am absolutely certain you have probably seen him on your page at some point in the last several years. He is an actor, comedian, and content creator, originally from Texas, but he's lived all over. And today we're going to talk about pretty much everything comedy, social media, his background. So please give a warm welcome to my guest today, Kev on stage. Kev, thank you so much for joining us.
What's up, Corey? Thank you so much for having me, man. Excited.
Kev, I just want to let you know straight up. I think the first time I saw one of your videos was on Facebook, probably like 2017, 2018, like
Wow.
several years ago. And I remember you popping up on my Facebook all the time. And I was like, okay, this dude's pretty funny. And it was very relatable
Yeah.
comedy. And then fast forward to about within the last year, I'm scrolling on TikTok and I see you and I'm like, oh, Kev on stage on TikTok now. That's cool. And then I see at the bottom of the screen, it said follows you. And I was like, wait a minute, Kev following me? And that was one of those moments where kind of like when you feel like you've made it, when someone that you consider famous and that you've been following for years, it's already following you and watching your work. That was a big moment for me. I immediately started following you, and I've just been a big fan for a long time. So I mean, I really appreciate that.
Yeah, of course, man. Most people don't know this about me, but I'm a complete and utter history nerd. It was my favorite subject in middle school, high school, college. Specifically, the most interesting subject is World War II history.
Yeah.
And you had a video. It wasn't World War II, but you were talking about how war started. And I was like, oh wow, like I just love the way you use comedy and education to talk about history. And I just be nerding out watching your videos and laughing. You'd be cracking me up and learn. I'd be laughing and learning. And I think you do such a good job. So absolutely a huge fan.
Thank you, Kev. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that. So first things first, for people who may not be as familiar with you and your work, tell us a little bit about your background. You know, where you're from. I know you come from a military family, so you moved around a lot. And just tell us how you got into comedy. Like, how did that become something that you knew you wanted to do with your life?
Yeah. Essentially, as a kid, honestly, I always liked making people laugh. I realized I made people laugh in my house when I would make people laugh. I I got to stay up later. So I saw the value pretty quickly. So yeah, I mean, as a kid, I was just, recreating what happened funny in church. When I was in high school, I believe I was 16, the first time I ever did stand-up comedy, which was at church. And then I've been doing a certain version of that ever since. I started doing it on the internet because I wanted to be making plays like Tyler Perry and David E. Talbert and Jacarius Johnson, but I was living in Tacoma, Washington, and there just was no way to make a living doing that. So we figured if we make people laugh on the internet, maybe we can, get more fans across the world, and then we could do our plays. And then we realized the internet and doing our stuff was the play. And we just left the play furniture back in Washington, and I've been using the internet to make people laugh ever since.
I feel like a lot of people who come from the more traditional, like stand-up world and the performance world, especially maybe when you started doing social media, kind of had an aversion to using social media. This kind of notion that, oh, anybody can make people laugh online, and it's much
Yep.
harder to do it in real life and on stage. How do you feel about that? Like, do you feel like stand-up in real life is harder, but or do you feel like social media is harder? You know, which one of these do you think is a little bit more difficult to make people laugh from?
I I don't think either is hard. I think what people don't, in my opinion, this is just my opinion.
Mhm.
Don't shoot the messenger. I just feel like they are different skills.
Yeah.
It's a different skill set. I think stand-up comedy is a skill set that takes discipline, work ethic, research, and time on stage. I think social media content on the internet is a skill set that takes discipline, time, research, and time to create, right? What I equate it to is a lot of good stand-up comedians are also good comedic actors. But a lot of good stand-up comedians are not good comedic actors, and a lot of good comedic actors are not good stand-up comedians. but some people are good at both. But I think a lot of times stand-ups where they were frustrated, stand-up comedians, is because internet people were taking stand-up jobs, right? And stage time. And that's really not, that's the anger should be with the stand-up comedy clubs and the bookers. But what happened is people fail to realize, one, life's not fair, one, and two, a stand-up comedy club, they are in the business of selling food and alcohol.
Yeah.
So they don't actually care if you're funny or not. They care if you can convince people to come sit down and be forced to buy 2 items. You could go up there and read the book of Numbers. If you sell it out and then people got to buy 2 drinks and chicken, they gonna book you. So back in the day, it was based on merit. Whoever was the funniest used to do that, but it never really was. There was always people getting favors. If you were pretty, like all the negative stuff of anything always had to play. So I just think a lot of people thought it wasn't fair, but and maybe it wasn't, but life's not fair. So, but yeah, I appreciate both disciplines. I believe I can do both, but it's because I work on both. But I started doing stand-up, but I immediately early saw the value of social media and building up your fan base. And now, if you don't have a fan base, now the clubs are like, well, you don't have any followers. Why are we going to book you? So a lot of people who were like poo-pooing social media are kind of either A, behind, or B, don't know how to do it. And if they had started earlier, they probably would be selling more tickets. And I don't even mean that as like C, because I get both sides, but I'm just saying the way the world now, and in a lot of different worlds, if you have your own audience, it's always easier to do things.
First of all, you're absolutely correct about the way stand-up comedy clubs work. I've been doing stand-up off and on for like the last 5 years, started in 2019. I don't call myself a stand-up comedian because, first of all, I haven't been as consistent with it. And second of all, I feel like there is, like you said, so much discipline that goes into being a true stand-up comedian that I wouldn't even dare put myself in that category just yet. But when I did start doing stand-up, this was actually right before I got on TikTok. It was all about, I was doing like these open mic nights, and it was all about how many people you could bring with you. If you could bring people
for sure.
If you could bring people with you, they're putting you on. They're going to 5 people, 6 people, you bringing your family with you. They're going to let you get your 5 minutes in. If you were coming by yourself, they were a little more reluctant. They were like, maybe we'll put you on. We'll see. We'll wait list you. We'll see.
Absolutely.
But now with the social media following, it's just kind of like you tell them how many followers you guys, like, oh, you got how many followers? Oh yeah, come on in. It's just that simple.
That's such a good point, Corey. I didn't even think about that. In LA, they call them bringer shows. And sometimes you have to do it, but if you can bring, like I was saying, them people, they got to sell food and liquor.
Yeah.
Not jokes are medium to get people to come in and buy food and liquor.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if you're a ventriloquist or whatever, but you're right. Like, even if you're popular, it has always helped you if you can bring your own audience to something. It's always going to be better for you.
Yes, absolutely. Would you say that now you got onto the internet, earlier on, and like you said, there was a kind of a resistance for other stand-up comedians to do that. When you were doing stand-up prior to the internet, did you see a shift? Like when you started getting popular with social media, did you start seeing a shift like, oh, I'm able to get more people to come see my shows? How much did social media play into building the stand-up career that you already had going?
So it's a great question. For me, I'll just say I was blessed, right? Because I was living in Tacoma and we didn't have the money to move to LA, that wasn't a feasible thing for me, right? So in LA, the comics were grinding it out at the clubs because that's how you got on stage, by being seen, hanging out, and being funny. But I was in Tacoma with raised, 2 boys and a wife and a regular job. So I was like, like I said before about Tyler Perry, I felt if I can get my fans up, I could do these plays. And then what started happening, people started booking us. That's where the name The Playmakers came from, which is the group I was a part of. Then people would just book all 3 of us to come to their church and make them laugh. And we would do like basically a 3-man show, essentially is what we would do. So for years, the only place I would perform, because the only place I would get booked in was churches. First with the Playmakers, and then when we kind of, didn't work together as much, I was still doing, mostly clean content on the internet, and people would still have me come to their church. So I was already going my own route because there was only one comedy club in Washington. that I was doing Nate Jackson's Super Funny Comedy room or club at the time. It was in a room, but now he owns his own club. So I was already doing my thing. And then when I moved to LA, I was still like, I remember when I got here, comics were like, yo, if you want to get on in LA, you got to come pull up every night. You got to literally hang out at the shows and then hang out after, then go to Denny's. And that's how you build camaraderie. That's how you get booked. And my wife was like, absolutely not. We moved to this new town. You're not finna be out all night, leaving me alone in this house with these two kids. And I'm like, you know what, fair. So I just kept using the internet. And I did that basically until I went on tour myself. Right. By then I realized I was on tour with another promoter and some other comedians. And I realized, yo, we're selling all the tickets, but the promoter's taking half of the money and we're splitting the other half 3 ways, but they're coming to see us. If I can sell these tickets, I could sell a third of these if I'm not splitting half with him and 2/3 with the other people. And I don't even need to sell this many tickets to make money. I could just sell 300. It would be better than 300 that I all get is better than 1,100 that I get a third of half, or half of a third. So that's kind of all that came from the ability to have my own audience that liked me and was willing to pay to come see me.
That's really interesting. Kev, I didn't realize how much we had in common because your story of starting this career, you were married, you had 2 kids, you were living in an area that wasn't really known for stand-up, wasn't really known for entertainment. Very similar to my story because when I got started on TikTok, I was married, my wife was pregnant at the time, and I was living in Alabama.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yes.
Oh.
Yes. I was living in
Alabama.
Yes, Huntsville, Alabama, to be exact. And
wow.
I was as far away from, New York, LA, anything you think of. I was about 3 hours from Atlanta, and I would go to Atlanta. I did a couple of open mic nights there, but it was so far and I was working at the time. It wasn't feasible for me to do that all the time. So that's actually why I got started on TikTok. Cause I was like, well, I've heard of this app. Let me just do some comedy skits on here, some little stuff on there, see where it goes. And originally I was just doing regular little comedy bits, anything I could think of. And then I did a couple of history bits. They got extremely popular. And then I was like, well, I'm a big history buff. I love history. Let me just do that from now on. And that's how my page gradually turned into a history page. And within like a year or 2 of doing that, I got a job offer and ended up moving to New York City and lived there for almost 2 years working up there.
Wait.
Yeah.
Tell me more about this.
Well,
tell me more. I know it's my interview, but I need to know more.
Well, my content started getting really popular. And one thing that it really gravitated towards was like journalism. A lot of news people were seeing my stuff and was like, the way you tell history stories is so interesting. If you could translate that to telling current events in a similar manner, that's something we could really work with. And so I was already doing stuff with Washington Post, different people like that. And then this company was a startup out of New York that it saw my stuff, really liked it, and was like, we're about to do a podcast, a YouTube channel, the whole 9 yards. We need like personalities, people who can be the face of that. Is that something you're interested in? I was like, yeah, okay, that's something I'm interested in. And so, moved to New York and was up there for about a good 2 years working in that field. And that's kind of also how I got back into stand-up, because being in New York, I was like, okay, this is like a stand-up mecca. So I just hit that open mic night scene and just every other night was just, I would do my journalism job in New York
now?
I'm not. I'm back near the Atlanta area now. I'm about an hour outside of Atlanta right now. But I was in New York for about 2 years, and just every other night I would just be going to those different clubs, going to different parts, just trying to work it out on stage, doing my journalism job in the day and doing stand-up at night. And it was crazy. And like you said, you got to really, to get good at stand-up, you really have to, like you said, stay late at those shows, stay after, connect. And much like you, my wife was not. No, it was not really an option for me either. And that's one of the reasons why I didn't excel as much in stand-up, because I kind of like refocused the efforts mainly on the social media, because I was doing a little bit more there, getting a bigger audience there. But yeah, like it's just crazy how similar our stories are, because it really is very similar.
You try to keep that family intact, you got to figure out another way to do what you want to do.
Yes.
That's what you got. And a lot of people, and this is no hate, no disrespect, but some people choose the career over the family, and that has its consequences.
Yeah.
And some people are like family first, and that has its consequences. Sometimes it works out for like you and I, like you figure out a way to do both, but it usually requires doing something new, which is like using the internet, which is the great equalizer, you know, and people watch your videos all over the world, which is never, having fans all over the world is never going to hurt anything you want to do in any way you're trying to monetize something. If you're not trying to be famous, it's very hurtful. But other than that, it usually works for you.
That's actually one of the best things I've ever heard the whole time I've been doing this podcast. Like the idea, like if you have a lot of followers, it can help you with anything. But if you're not trying to be famous, it will hurt you with everything. That's a really good statement, because that's how I try to explain to people, like, because right now I'm working almost exclusively just on content, TikTok. Like that's where I make all my money from, and I'm doing pretty well. But then people are always like, you know, like my wife's family, they don't really get it. They don't really understand it. They're like, you're so good at journalism. Why don't you get a news anchor job somewhere? Why don't you go on the news? I'm like, yeah, I apply for those jobs, but they look at my content. They're like, you're famous and popular, but you do too much crazy stuff online. We can't put you on the news. Right. People go see, is that same kid cussing about history online? We can't put you on the news.
Well, the thing is, you are the news.
Yes,
right? Like
exactly.
I tell people all the time, like I have small kids. I don't know how old you are, but we seem within 10 to 15 years.
Yes.
And, you know. So when I was a kid, when I watched TV, I went to turn the TV on. I watched Turtles at 3:30 after school, right? By the time my kids got to be that age, TV they could always access what they wanted to watch, right?
Yeah.
And then as YouTube was grown and Twitch, they know I can go find my favorite creator, right? So, and as the world changes, as my nieces are born, they're doing the same thing. So these kids are not gonna grow up like when something happens to us, we like CNN.
Yeah.
You know, but now we also usually find out about it on Twitter or TikTok before CNN, right? Yeah. So our kids are not going to have any reason to go check on CNN. They're more likely to go to your page and be like, what has Corey got to say on this? And which is amazing, but also dangerous, because back in the day, like journalists went to journalism school. But if you're being honest, man, media has always had bias. Oh, you know, we just didn't know. I didn't think CNN was biased until I realized they're biased in my favor. So it seems like they're just credible. Yeah. But same, I'm no different than somebody who thinks Fox News is the right way and CNN is biased, because you know you want to hear what you want to hear, and the internet is just an even more individualized version of that.
It's crazy because what you're saying, like we did grow up in a pretty similar generation. I think I'm about maybe 8 or 10 years younger than you, so we definitely grew up in kind of similar, like, you know, 90s, 2000s. Something crazy going on, throw it on CNN, throw it on ABC, throw it on the TV channel. And now it's go to the internet, go to social media. And that's a hard thing to convince myself of, because one of the things when I was a kid, I always wanted to be like a late night TV host. Like that was like my dream. I was like, I want to be Black Letterman. I want to do what Arsenio Hall did. You know what I'm saying? That was like my dream. And like I was telling my brother the other day, I was like, you know, I still really want to do that. And he was like, but nobody even watches those shows anymore. Like everybody's going to your page. I don't even
know how they are on. How much are they getting? And I'm not even being funny. Like I never, ever see anybody like, oh yeah, I was watching this on TV. We see the clips.
Yeah.
But like, who is watching? Who is turning that on? Everybody before they go to bed now is scrolling on whatever platform. I don't see anybody or hear of anybody doing that. So I totally agree with your brother. Like, you are somebody's David Letterman now.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's so hard to convince, and I know that, I see the numbers and I know that, but like, because of the way we grew up, there's like this legitimacy to being on TV, having the big stage behind you, having sponsors and advertisers, which I do have advertisers on my page sometimes. Yeah. But like, it's just that it's hard to kind of retrain your brain to think that we really are the equivalency of what Arsenio was doing back in the day, or what Steve Harvey was doing back in the day. We're doing that right now on social media. We're getting the same type of numbers. It's just a totally different way of doing it. And that's something I still have to convince myself of. I'm still trying to convince myself of that.
Good reason. Like I love Will Smith, and I took a picture with him and I made this joke for like years, right? And ever since I started making this joke of like, you know, posting this picture, people would meet me. They'll be like, "You're my Will Smith." Yeah. Like a lot of people said that, and I'm like, "Are you crazy?" Like Will Smith was in The Fresh Prince for 5 seasons. He was in Independence Day. Everything, all of those things, like, but then somebody brought this up in a YouTube interview, and I never thought of it this way. Say Denzel Washington's your favorite actor, Corey, and Denzel say On a good year, he might make 2 movies a year, but maybe 1. But let's just say he makes 2 movies. Now, Denzel is traditional Hollywood, right? So his rollouts, he's not on social media. He is a movie star, nor does he have to be. Like he's good. But if Denzel does Gladiator, right, whenever that comes out, he's basically going to do about a month to 6 weeks of press.
Mm-hmm.
And in that time period, with all his interviews and all the clips and everything he does, that might generate, say, 8 hours of content. And if you're a Denzel fan and you watch every interview and you read every magazine article, it's probably 8 hours. And you watch the movie, that's 10 hours. Okay. For the year. So say he does 2 movies, that's 20 hours of Denzel for the year. I do an hour and a half podcast twice a week. Usually I have 3 or 4 podcasts that are an hour long weekly that is aired. And you also have my videos. You might watch 10 hours of content of mine in 2 or 3 days or 2 weeks. So people spend much more time with us than they do traditional stars. And the more time you spend with somebody, the bigger or the more famous they feel. Now, Denzel is in a big screen, so that just feels larger than life. Mm-hmm. But for me and you, I feel like I know you, man. Like people have watched my kids grow up on the internet, and we don't even have we're not even a family content channel. Yeah. They've just seen pictures, and my kids are in my videos maybe once every 3 or 4 months per year now, if that. So they're like, he has a mustache. I remember when they were young, they used to be on the internet a lot. But you see what I'm saying? Like, you never feel like you know Denzel. I remember when Denzel's son started acting, I was like, I didn't even know he had kids.
I didn't either.
His son was on HBO. I was like, I did not know that man had any children.
Yeah.
And I've seen probably 98% of his movies. So, that's, I think, the difference. We are so much more connected via social media and technology than we were. And we feel more connected because of technology and because of time spent, really.
I mean, I never really thought about it like that. And that's so true. I've had people, when I was in New York, a lot of people would come up to me and I would get spotted. And I remember the first few times it started happening, I was like, what? You recognize me from TikTok? And it was so surreal. Like, I couldn't, I never really thought oh, wow, these numbers are real. Like, there actually are people
1,000%
all over the world watching this who will recognize me in real life. And I've had fans, I was thinking about quitting TikTok a few months ago, and I was talking to it about him on live. I was like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And I had just a litany of fans just messaging me, please don't stop doing these videos. We love this. We get education from this. We get comedy from this. Please don't stop doing these videos. And I was like, well, now I can't stop. I got these fans, these followers, and they're the reason why I've been able to, work in this space for the last few years. So I got to be respectful to them and what they want to see. And I do enjoy doing it. It gets, as you get burnout doing social media. You start thinking of, what am I going to do next? You start kind of getting writer's block at times.
Yeah.
It gets kind of hectic. It definitely does. I want to talk to you a little bit about, influences, because I was talking to my mom the other day, and I was trying to describe your comedy to her. And, she actually recognized when I showed you the picture, she was like, oh, I've seen him before. But before she saw your picture, I was trying to tell her who I was going to be talking to. And I was trying to think of somebody to compare him to. I was like, well, he does church humor. So he's, a little bit like Ricky Smiley, but kind of different from that, because I feel like Ricky Smiley is a little different, kind of, a little bit more over the top. Yours is a little bit more subtle, a little bit more direct. And so I was trying to think, of another comedian. I was like, well, I can't really think of any, because I think you have a really unique style. And so who are some of your comedy influences? Who are some of the people that either you grew up watching, or just in general, when you decided to really go full force with comedy, who are some of the people that really influenced you to do it the way you do it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's interesting because my stage persona and my internet persona don't come from the same place. So stand-up wise, I'd say Jonathan Slocum was probably the first person who ever did church comedy in a way that wasn't just in character. He was talking about the church from his own voice. And that was a person who made me be like, oh my gosh, you could even do this. Even though I wasn't planning on being a stand-up, that was the first time I even thought it was possible. Arnez J is probably my favorite comedian. And the way he is very physical, he is a huge influence on me. As far as the internet goes, I'm probably closer to Ray William Johnson than anybody else. People might not know who that is, but if OG YouTube, I've just basically been doing a version of Equals 3 on the internet for all these years, right? He had a full length show, and I've just been doing a short version of like jump cuts, couple of jokes, all of that type of stuff. So that's probably my closest internet persona. He doesn't do it as much, nearly as much, and he does it on TikTok, maybe shorter than he used to, but that's probably the two. And then also I've done, I just like to make people laugh. So every type of content that can be done, I've done. I've done sketches, I've done skits, I've done listicles, I've done voiceovers. I mean, like anything. I will probably have done. I've done parody music way early. We did a lot of parody music. So however the wind blows and however I feel like creating, I will. But I usually just do these short. I saw this on the internet videos because I'm doing a lot of other stuff now.
Mhm.
So I just can't spend a lot of time making videos. I need to do stuff that takes me not a lot of time to think about, shoot, or edit. So that's what I focus on while I'm doing the other stuff that continues the business.
But you do it so well, because one thing I noticed is when I started watching your TikTok page, like I said, I've been watching you on Facebook for years before that. And I noticed your TikTok videos were a little different from the stuff you did on Facebook. And it's like you looked at how people do TikToks and you adapted your style to that format. And I think that's probably why you've been doing so well on TikTok, is because you realize, okay, these people a little younger, they do it a little differently from Facebook. I'm gonna do it like this. And so I love your listicles. I love the one I saw the other day that had me cracking up. You did a video about it was like somebody had like this like incredible starting five in basketball, like Jordan and
Yeah.
all these great people was on it. And you was like, okay, I'm gonna try to pick a starting five that can beat this. And the whole video, it's very like high basketball IQ. Like you giving like real reasons why these individuals would be best at their position. And the whole time I'm like, I'm not even laughing. I'm like, he's right. Okay, I like this pick. I like this pick. When you hit that last one, I'm not even gonna spoil it for people who haven't seen it. But when you hit that last person, I was like, it's like it brought me back. It's like, that's why he's a comedian, because you did that whole video. Well, the whole thing was a setup, and the whole time people think this is a very okay. You really giving me some good.
Yeah.
And then that last one is like, okay, dog, I see what you did. I see what you did there. And that's just
Nah,
like
that's
genius comedy right there.
1000%. I agree. And that was like, that's why I was saying that the internet earlier in the conversation, how content works on the internet is a skill. And
Yes.
TikTok, like YouTube videos, when we started, the screen was, horizontal, and it was high production value. But as phones got better and cheaper, more of it came to their phones. And then Instagram introduced, video. And then, that's when video really got proliferated, when everybody could just upload. Because Vine was a thing, but I feel like the best Viners were super smart and super sharp. I could never get Vine going. But anyway, it wasn't until TikTok where I was like, oh, you have to have a totally different approach on TikTok. You can't put the caption where the caption goes because nobody's reading it. You got to put the caption in text, and it's got to be much faster. And sounds are more important, and trends are more important. So you're right. And now basically, I still have a lot of fans on Facebook, but whatever works for TikTok, I just put it on Facebook, and they just gonna have to be okay, because TikTok basically became the leader in how content was created. Absolutely. Because it was like so much virality was on TikTok. Unless you're making a podcast or a long form YouTube video, anything short form, everybody just ended up following TikTok. And it started with Snapchat and stories and stuff, but TikTok kind of took what made Vine great, stories, YouTube, and like smashed it together with the ability to find new people like YouTube used to be and Vine used to be. And as such, because of this, the discoverability, it became the premier video creation platform as far as style goes. Because sometimes I'll do a TikTok trend, post it on Instagram, and they will have no idea what this is a reference to.
Yeah.
And Facebook, they'll have even less, and vice versa. Sometimes something will do well on Facebook, and TikTok will be like, "Unc, we don't even know what that is." Like, my kids do not have a Facebook, nor have they ever had it. And they think it's the weirdest thing. But my nieces and all my kids, they have Instagram, but they never post on their grid. They use only the story feature. And they treat it like Snapchat. So I basically study the internet like a nerd, and that's how you stay relevant, because it's in 2 years from now, it'll be different. You know what I mean? Like, and if you're not paying attention, you will low key just be old, because it's always changing.
Yeah, it is always changing, and it's crazy when you point out all the differences. Because to me, what's so impressive about your work is that you got super popular on Facebook when that was really hard to do. Because
Oof.
I remember like people that I was working with, and even myself, trying to put up little videos on Facebook or even YouTube, and it
Yeah.
was like I get 20 views, I get
Yeah.
15 likes. It was very difficult. So when I saw you blowing up on Facebook, you were one of the first, not really, I would say, yeah, one of the first comedians that I saw that was getting like really big numbers on Facebook. I was like, how does he do that? Because it was interesting to me as somebody who was trying to do something similar at the time. I was like, how did you do that? And then when I first got on TikTok, it just blew my mind. Like almost
Yeah.
immediately, I started getting these high
Yeah.
numbers, and I was like, what is this?
Man, I'll
And
tell you, I'm
mhm.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
Go
no,
ahead.
no, no, go for it.
King Kieran, a guy I used to work with at All Def, he's the reason I got big on Facebook. Like I
All
saw
deaf. I
him
remember
take,
all deaf. Yeah, I totally.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
he took all his Instagram skits he ever did, and he just started putting them on Facebook 3 or 4
Mhm.
times a day. Because I used to only just post memes on Facebook,
Yeah.
but Facebook was paying really well at this time,
Mhm.
so I just started posting videos on Facebook, and that's why like everybody uses YouTube and stuff, so I basically just started on there. But you're right, like it's all because of work. It's a lot of work. That's what people don't realize.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
especially your type of videos. Like I mean, you probably have a lot of knowledge, but your videos, you got to prepare.
Oh yeah.
You got to stand here, stand there, edit. So people who consume sometimes don't realize how much work it actually takes to make a 60-second video. And sometimes, and I know this has happened to you, you've probably spent all afternoon shooting and editing a video for it to do nothing, and it's something you spent 30 seconds on goes viral that you don't care about, and you're just like,
That is,
oh.
well, with for TikTok specifically, that is the golden rule of TikTok. And that is
Right.
something I noticed very early on. I would put so much time and effort in something, just fall flat on his face. My first video that went super viral, I did it in probably 30 minutes, threw it together, was like, this will be pretty. It was actually a World War II video. I was like, this will
Yeah.
be pretty good. This will be pretty great. Within like 2 days, 3 million views. And I was like,
That's
what?
probably the video I found you. I know the first video I saw from you was World War II, and I was like, this is heaven for me. A young black man talking about war and comedy was great. But yeah, it just be like that sometimes. That's why I also post on all the platforms,
Yeah.
because you just never know which one's gonna go big on. But you really got to be active on all of them
Yeah.
for it to work on all of them. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
How do you think, because you just said something earlier that I think was interesting, where you said your on-stage persona is a little different from your internet persona. How do you think blowing up on social media and all of the attention you get there has shaped or changed the way you approach stand-up?
I don't think it's changed too much, except not how I approach stand up, but before, and I'd probably say before this year, I was before the pandemic, I was very precious about my material. Like I
Yeah.
did my set, and I did not want that spoiled. But because of the internet, like you got to remind, like most of my early years, people didn't even know I did stand up. They only knew me from the internet. They want to say come to my show, a lot of times they'd be like, "Oh, you're actually good at this," because we went to other people's show and they're not good, but usually they were just starting out. But you
Mhm.
like them so much you wanted to go see them. But I think I do well at stand up because I've done the work to do stand up. But I've noticed like I can have a really good joke and it doesn't do well on social media because there's no intro hook, there's no trending topic, there's not stuff that is needed. Like a great bit on stage often doesn't translate
Yeah.
to TikTok or any social media because you got to kind of get to the point within, I usually say 3 to 5 seconds. You got to either hook them or they're out. So you can't be like, 3 guys walk into a bar, I'm out. Right. But like when I do like shows now, for the most part, if I'm not doing my hour, I try to talk about something trending just so I can put that on the internet. And
Mhm.
that's something I usually would never even make a joke about ever again, just to remind people that I do stand up or introduce them to my stand up. So but I don't try to go on stage and make an internet joke. That is a
Mm.
different thing. I
Mhm.
try to make something usually just trending or relevant, or if it's short and it works, I'll apply it to the internet. But I used to try to make something on stage funny for the internet. And what happens is the people watching you in your face don't think it's funny, and then it doesn't work. So I
Yeah.
keep them separate, and then when it works and it lines up, it works. But like crowd work, for example, like Matt Rife and Nate Jackson have blown up on crowd work.
Mhm.
People think that's easy. That's probably the hardest stand up.
Absolutely.
Like
Absolutely.
you got to be super confident, super sharp, super witty, all that stuff, because they're giving you the best bits. They don't give you the bits where the audience gave them absolutely nothing. And those two guys, I can't speak for everybody, but those two guys I know are actually good stand-ups without crowd work, but they realize the way to get people to come to my shows is with this, because you can get a good caption, you can get everything you need, caption, first 5 seconds, all that works with crowd work. But I'm not a crowd work comedian. I don't do it nearly as good as other people. So I got to make what works for me work. And sometimes you just got to realize what you're not good at.
Yeah.
You might not be good at everything. And sometimes people are going to be able to excel and blow up, and you won't be able to capitalize on that because it's not your skill set. And sometimes I'm just like, I'm okay with that as well.
Yeah. Well, there's so many different types of comedy. And I think that's something that people who don't work in comedy don't seem to understand. Like, there's so many different types, so many different approaches. Like you said, crowd work, I could never. I just wouldn't be able to keep up with it. And just like, I could probably start it really well, but like you said, if the audience member isn't giving you anything, it's like, what do you do? And if you're not doing it right, you take all the air out of your jokes. And then,
absolutely,
as if that first few jokes aren't hitting, it don't matter if you got some good jokes 3 minutes down the line, you've lost the crowd. And they're not going to laugh at anything you do.
Absolutely. And that's why I didn't do it. And that's why I still, for the most part, don't do it, because I've never developed that skill of stand-up. And it's fine. I don't even, and now I can't go and develop it because somebody records me. I'm just going to be bombing over and over. But luckily I can sell my tickets doing my other thing because of the internet. So you got to find what works for you and exploit it to the best of your ability. And then continue to try to, maximize off of that.
Absolutely. If a young person was thinking about going into comedy today, would you tell that person, you might want to do some stage work first, then navigate to social media? Or would you say, go on social media first, kind of find your audience, figure out what works for you, and then go to stand-up? Which one would you suggest a person kind of put their efforts in at the beginning of their stand-up career, or their comedy career, I should say?
That's a great question. I've never been asked this before, so I actually need to take a moment and think. I'd say your best bet is to do both simultaneously.
Yeah.
Because most of the skills are non-transferable. The stuff my wife hit me to this comedian who said stand-up is really the mastery of a couple of different other skills: timing, creativity, stage presence, public speaking, reading an audience, originality. The more you are good with that, the better of a stand-up you'll be. Internet comedy is understanding what's relevant, how to get to the point quickly, how to make succinct jokes, how to edit funny, how to be quick, and understand what trends and types of videos work, right? How to get somebody in your internet. I'll use this example. People are watching TikTok like this. They're scrolling, they're scrolling. You have basically data shows you have between 2 and 3 seconds to grab somebody's attention, or they're moving on. So good creators know what stops you in your track. What will get you to hover over? If I could just hover and go from 3 seconds to 10 seconds, now I've got a chance. But there's nothing about stand-up comedy that will help you know that only on the internet can you learn. So the same way you get good at stand-up is by watching a lot of good stand-ups. Like when I was learning, not only did I perform a lot, for every 20 minutes I performed, I probably watched 2 hours per show. And I watched people navigate a rough crowd, a slow start, a trending topic, and seeing how good, like watch pretty much everybody was better than me at that time. I watched how good comedians were good, and I learned why bad comedians are bad. Same thing with internet comedy creation. Why do your videos work? Because your videos can be very long, but I'm interested. Why Drewski works? What he does really well. Drewski's very different from Kai Cenat, who's different from Katie Don, who's different from all these people, and Tony Baker, who does voiceovers. Like, there's a certain skill that comes with that, and why you want to stop watching those. So in both skills, in both disciplines, there's certain skills. So I would say it's in your best bet to develop them both simultaneously, because they'll help each other. But no matter how funny you are on the internet, it's not a one-to-one transition. But I've noticed people like you, people who talk a lot in their videos and rant, they translate better to stand up because you're talking a lot and you're ranting. If you're good at skits and sketches, hardly any of that outside of the premise translates to stand-up.
Yeah.
So with stand-up, if you're good at, say, hood guys be like, you can't act that out on stage.
Yeah.
You gotta you have to create the world for the viewer. So you can do that. So that's why people who rant a lot on videos, however their style is, they tend to translate better to stand-up because that's a closer skill set, you know. But people who do skits, they can translate, but there's nothing from skits or very little from skits that's gonna translate on like a 1-to-1 ratio.
Absolutely. This has been like taking a master class, honestly, in comedy because your comedy IQ is so high. I knew it would be, but this is great.
Thank you.
I want to talk, just, got a few more minutes here. I want to talk a little bit about, you've got a new book out
Yeah.
called Marriage Be Hard.
Yeah.
Now, I've been married for about a little over half a decade now, about 5-6 years, going on 6 years now.
Yeah.
And got a good marriage, got a good wife, but I can
Yeah.
concur, it do be hard sometimes. Sometimes it do be hard.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about your book and what inspired you to write that.
Yeah. So Marriage Be Hard came from our podcast called The Love Hour. We did a podcast, my wife and I, called The Love Hour. And the whole genesis of that is like, we want to help people in marriage because we love marriage and we want people to succeed.
Yeah.
And we want to help people. We want to help give them the information we wish we had when we were young, right? Because we spent a lot of our early years just basically trying to either really duplicate what we saw in our pastor's marriage, our parents' marriage.
Yeah.
But you can't duplicate a marriage for a marriage. You have to learn from a marriage and apply it to yourself. So the podcast was basically like, let us tell you the lesson we just learned in marriage in hopes that you don't make the same mistake. So our whole point was like, we're not at the top of the mountain looking down, telling you, here's how you get up here. We're climbing up the marriage mountain with you and saying, don't put your foot in that rock because that one's going to slip. I just did that. Put your foot right here and then grab right here. And as we climb up, you might go up there because we're still learning at the same time. You'd be like, all right, Kevin, put your hand right here. And that's kind of the approach. And I think it worked because my wife's an amazing educator and teacher, and I'm just a nut. So most marriage content, especially podcasts and books, they're so educational. They come across preachy.
Yeah.
And people don't usually want to reveal what their mistakes were. I'm a comedian, so a mistake leads to much more material than success. So I don't mind sharing the mistakes, and my wife doesn't mind teaching. So I think that's why the podcast was successful, which led to the book being successful.
That's great. That's great. I mean, I think anybody who's even thinking about being married should definitely go to those types of sources just to get advice. And like you said, it's not about duplicating or repeating what someone else has done in their marriage. It's about getting the tools that you can apply to your own individual situation.
Absolutely.
And so I'm always looking for material like that to help. I think that's a really cool idea. So just tell us a little bit, Mike, here at the end, what do you got going on these days? What kind of projects are you working on? What are you looking forward to next in your, career of comedy?
Yeah, the thing I'm most excited about always is my Patreon. Building my Patreon, KevOnStageStudios.com will lead to it. I've got bonus episodes of my podcast. We've got some shows that we created, discounts, and it's like a community of people who can come and have a good time. I love it because as the internet gets more nasty, for me as a creator, it feels so much better to have a safe place of people who like me so much they'll give me $5 a month. And not that they worship me or I'm above reproach, but if you're in community with somebody, you can have a good time, but you can also check them if they need to be checked. But that check is coming from a place of love and respect. Whereas on the majority of the internet, they just want to start an argument or vent or project anger onto you. So more and more, I'm enjoying that space more than any space because as the political climate gets more violent and angry and bots and Russian intelligence or whatever the case is, the comment section isn't as loving and free flowing as it was early in social media days.
Yeah.
So that's that. And pretty much anything else, follow me on Kev on Stage, whatever I'm working on, whenever you hear this, go look up Kev on Stage on whatever platform you're on. I guarantee you I'll be promoting something.
Well, Kev, I appreciate this so much, man. This was a great conversation. Like I said,
Thank
I've been
you,
a
bro. I
fan
had a
of
great
yours.
time.
Yes, thank you. I've been a fan of yours for many years now, so it was just awesome to get to meet you, to get to talk to you. I hope to talk to you again. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Have a good afternoon.